Hello and welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. My name is Paul Tunnah and I'm the founder of pharmaphorum. Today I'm joined by Jeff Baxter, CEO of VBI Vaccines, and Lee Taurman, Executive Vice President Full Service Commercial at Syneos Health. Today we'll be talking about some of the unique development and commercialization challenges in the world of preventative vaccines, as well as discussing the partnership between VBI and Syneos as an example of the kind of agile collaboration that can really help in today's complex landscape. Today's episode is produced in partnership with Syneos Health.
So let's start with a bit of background on yourselves, gentlemen. Your former careers, your current roles, and Jeff, perhaps you'd like to go first.
Sure. So Jeff Baxter, President CEO of VBI Vaccines. Way back when, finance and economics graduate, worked for Unilever, and then found my way to work for a tiny UK pharma company called Glaxo, which then became Glaxo Wellcome, which then became GlaxoSmithKline. In 18 years, I did 13 jobs across almost every function: commercial R&D, corporate development, etc. Became a founding managing partner in a venture capital firm called the Column Group. I stayed for the first fund, so I was there for about 4 years. And once that was fully committed, I realized that whilst I really enjoyed the world of investments, my passion was for running things. So I then joined VBI, and I've now been the president and CEO of VBI for 13 years.
Fantastic. So great career spanning big pharma right through to the biotech side. And Lee, what about yourself? Tell me a bit more about your background and current role.
Yeah, sure. Current role is Executive Vice President of Full Service Commercial and Syneos One at Syneos Health. Really responsible for how we build partnerships with our clients and bring a lot of the capabilities of Syneos Health together in a sort of unified way. In terms of background, been in the industry for a couple of decades, kind of spanning, I would say, a lot of different things. I started off my career loading trucks in warehouses. So I came out of undergrad with a supply chain and logistics background, got involved in product launches by waiting for the FDA to approve things so I could load trucks and send them off to various wholesalers and distributors. Along the way, got interested in how things actually got into those boxes and went and got my MBA, joined PricewaterhouseCoopers in the consulting business, had done an internship at J&J, obviously, ironically ended up consulting to the same product that I was supporting in my internship. So been involved in the industry ever since in the services and on the manufacturer side. So been the chief strategy officer on the manufacturer side, done a lot of strategy and operations consulting along the way at IBM and PricewaterhouseCoopers, and joined Syneos Health about 5 years ago. And at the time, this full service commercial and Syneos One concept was really a merger thesis. And now it's really an ongoing business, and it's been exciting kind of to be here from the ground, literally from a whiteboard to a going concern. So pretty happy to be working with folks like Jeff as we've done this along the way. So we're pretty excited for our conversation.
Fantastic. And we're obviously going to talk today about your collaboration, but I never would have guessed your career started with loading trucks. What a great story. Exactly. Before we dive into the collaboration, Jeff, I just want to come back to you because, obviously the focus of VBI is on vaccines, but specifically, HBV and glioblastoma as the lead indications. Why those areas? Why the passion for those?
Well, I think the reason that we're in this industry, whether it's big pharma, big biotech, small biotech, or in fact, in Syneos, is, to focus on significant unmet medical needs. And I know that's an often overused line by biotech and pharma CEOs, but I really do think, given the overall probabilities of success through the R&D and pipeline development process, that you have to have a fundamental belief in making the world a healthier place if you're going to be in our business. As you say, our focus is on hepatitis B and glioblastoma, both being very significant unmet medical needs. So the WHO estimate that there's nearly 300 million people, 296 to be precise, million people in the world chronically infected with HBV. There's over 1 million deaths annually across the globe from hepatitis and related comorbidities, such as cirrhosis, chronic viral hepatitis B. And hepatitis B is known as the silent killer because a lot of people get infected with hepatitis B in childhood, in adolescent years, when they go to college. It's known as silent killer, though, because people don't actually really see the symptoms manifest physically, usually until they're in their early 40s or their 50s. In fact, the WHO estimate that only 10% of that nearly 300 million people that are chronically infected across the globe are actually aware they're infected with hepatitis B. So if they're at college, if they're adolescents, if they're in their 20s and 30s and living a normal life, there's a high degree of that potential for hepatitis B to be spread. In fact, hepatitis B is 100 times more infectious than HIV. So, our belief is that the way to prevent hepatitis B infection is clearly prophylactic vaccination. And whilst for some time now, the last 20 or so years, a first dose of hepatitis B vaccination given to children when they're born. But again, the WHO estimate that only 40% of newborn children receive that first dose. So it's a significant opportunity to improve vaccination rates and protect people from that initial infection. Further, the world of a functional cure of hepatitis B, there's no cure at the moment for hepatitis B. So if you get hepatitis B, 40s, 50s, you start showing some liver function degradation. That can lead to cirrhosis, liver cancer, dialysis, etc. And so we believe with our therapeutic, which is currently in a phase 2B study in China, where there's 200 million chronically infected people, but the sort of scientific world is now moving to realize the concept of a functional cure. So we're focused on both sides of the hepatitis B fight, both the prevention and the potential for cure. It really is a very significant public health burden and, of course, personal and family burden upon those chronically infected. Secondly, glioblastoma. Now, glioblastoma, most common form of brain cancer, is the most fatal form of cancer. There is no current standard of care for glioblastoma. And when you think that the Optune helmet in the primary setting, first diagnosis, got approved on basically a 4 to 6 months extension in overall survival, it just shows you how desperate that neuro-oncologists are for new ways to treat glioblastoma. Now, we have an immunotherapeutic, VBI-1901, which is in very successful and encouraging phase 1 and phase 2 studies, shows that we can double the median overall survival rates in a phase 1, phase 2A study in recurrent glioblastoma. So we're now going into a phase 2B study, which is going to be randomized controlled study, potentially under our fast track designation, take that forward for accelerated approval. And also we'll be starting a study at the end of this year in the primary setting. So these two terrible, terrible kind of diseases, one probably prior, obviously, to COVID-19 pandemic, one of the most contagious and one of the most fatal and widespread of the common viruses in the population, hepatitis B. So we have a prophylactic and a therapeutic, and then secondarily, we have this glioblastoma immunotherapeutic, which we're really excited about, as are the FDA and the neuro-oncologists, about the outcome of this phase 2B randomized controlled study.
Thank you, Jeff. And I thought it was important just to sort of set the scene there, because as you've outlined, two really important areas with potential to shift the needle enormously, but perhaps not always kind of top of the list of areas that people think about as needing urgent new treatment. So definitely wish you best of luck with the continued trials there. But let's come back to kind of how you're collaborating at the moment. I know you've both been working together for a few years now, and what I heard from you in preparing for this was it's a kind of very, if I can say, non-traditional service provider to biopharma client relationship. And I'd love to hear a bit more about how you work together, why that is. So, Lee, perhaps you'd like to comment on that first and take us back to the start of this journey.
Yeah, and I think it was 2019, Jeff, when we really started working together. And I think it actually began with an initial consulting project where we were looking at, options around strategies to go to market. I think that was very focused in the medical affairs domain early on, which would make sense at that point in time. And I think where we had been as an organization as I had mentioned earlier, kind of moving toward this different kind of partnership model where we bring the capabilities of the company together in a different way. It's really focused around what the needs of the emerging biopharma company is, right? And how do we meet those needs in a non-traditional way? So traditionally, you would just sell a consulting project and do it and move on and hope that maybe there's another one after. But really, we're unique in the sense that we have agency capabilities and field deployment capabilities. And we have a lot of people who are from the industry, non-services backgrounds that do that. So how do we meet BBI where they are with what they need and have a broader relationship perhaps where we can help them in a more meaningful way than just as a single solution service provider. And I think there was a desire from BBI to perhaps think about the path to market in a different way as well. And look for single service providers, look for a more externalized model than just an in-house build model. And I think there's always been this, as you take things to market, we call binary choice of license the product away or build everything yourself in-house. And ultimately what we've been seeking to do and have been able to do is create an alternative to that, a middle ground, if you will, where you retain the asset, you retain the strategic decision-making and the optionality associated with what you do with that asset going forward, but you build toward a commercialization program, really allowing you to focus in strategic areas that you choose as a customer. And BBI is very focused on the science, as you just heard Jeff talk about, sort of meeting unmet needs through the science itself. So I think that's where we met. We met along the way. We had an ability to deliver a different kind of partnership model that very much met where BBI was looking to go, and it's grown from there. And I think it's evolved over time, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. But I think it shows that there's another way to do this. I think in the marketplace, which is I think something that coming out of COVID, people are looking for a way to maybe getting things done in a different way.
Yeah, thank you. And, Jeff, from your perspective, we talked at the start about your experience of big pharma through to biotech. You've seen all these models. You probably were there considering how far can we take this ourselves? Do we out-license with big pharma? Do we look at the usual suspect service side and the models? Tell me from your experience, how you came to this kind of partnership and what you see as being different about it.
Yeah, it's interesting, Paul, because listening to Lee talk, we came at it completely the other direction because, through my 30 years of experience, I've watched a couple of companies now. And it's funny, retrospectively looking back, it doesn't seem like rocket science, but it was at the time because, early in my career at Glaxo, we were used to using, contract sales forces to implement, to supplement launches or to support established products. We worked with a whole host of marketing agencies, branding agencies, PR agencies. We worked with all of these companies, and it's been interesting over the last 5 to 6 years or decade, really, to see a couple of companies, start to acquire all of these vertical pillars and start to put them together. And so, when I was at GlaxoSmithKline, we thought we had the most effective sales and marketing and, field force in the world. And I'm sure Pfizer felt exactly the same. But actually, it was interesting watching our very best people leave to join some of these vertical pillars, which were then being merged into a total commercialization model. So really, as we were getting Prehevbrio, which is the prophylactic hepatitis B vaccine that we've launched in complete partnership with Syneos, as we thought about getting it to the finish line, exactly as Lee said, we started working in September 2019 with Syneos. And it was always with the view to assuming we were successful in the early steps and we would develop this completely sort of integrated commercialization model, right up to, commercialization and launch. And that's kind of how it panned out. And I think, the flip side of that for me was, as a biotech CEO, in terms of how I can bring most value to patient needs and unmet medical needs, is to focus on internally, organically developing new assets through clinical development and potentially acquiring those assets. And, you're never going to attract as a one product bag or even as a 2 product bag biotech company, the very best people in our industry.
Sure.
They want to work across multiple products. They want to switch in and out. They want to be involved in exciting launches and everything else. And so, as I said, I watched the very best people go to the likes of Syneos. And so, for us, it was access to talent. It was, quite frankly, operational effectiveness and efficiency and delivery. And thirdly, it was at the time and even now, because of the pressure, workload, opportunity in our pipeline, I didn't want the distraction of, having to hire 80 people, manage those people. Syneos, obviously, with tens of thousands of employees, have a very effective recruitment, talent identification process. It's very much part of their operational excellence. So we could never compete with that. So it was really, for me, those sort of four factors, best people, distraction, effectiveness, and, the need to effectively launch this product and get it into as many patients as possible that drove me towards this kind of model.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, just on that point, Lee, to come back to you, I mean, I guess every client wants the kind of the best skills and the A team and all that kind of stuff. And you work with a range of different clients. So how's it for you different when you're working with an emerging biotech like VBI versus some of the very big pharma companies? How do you structure the project differently? How do you approach it differently?
Yeah, I would say typically the large pharma companies operate just as Jeff was describing. They have specific needs that they need to fill. They have the ability to do all of these things. They have the marketing, the market access, the medical affairs, all of those capabilities there. They're typically making capital decisions around the deployment of capital to hiring new people or building out infrastructure or things like that, primarily geared toward key launch programs, right? So we're supplementing them by bringing the right kind of talent that they want to do that. Increasingly, we are seeing some of those companies start to look at what we call non-core assets. So they have assets in their pipeline that are outside their therapeutic category that are things that they typically might license or sell or shelve along the way. They're now looking to externalize some of that in a broader way where they're not looking to do that. On the emerging biopharma side, though, it's really interesting because they really, most of these companies have no infrastructure, right? They usually have one or two people that have a commercial background, heavily weighted toward the scientific clinical development side of the process. And they have these needs to bring these products to bear. So they are really looking for acquisition of talent, as Jeff said, the very best people. We're able to tap into the relationship that we have with Big Pharma, for instance, and people that are very experienced there. And it's actually somewhat of an attractive talent pool for us. It's more attractive to that talent pool because they can work at Pfizer or GSK, that have been mentioned on the call, or an emerging biopharma like VBI, or really interesting launches wherever it is. And they have this opportunity to move around. So we are able to attract people that, maybe want some stability because there is some instability in the emerging biopharma market. Products fail, companies fail along the way. That's the nature of the industry that we're in. And you have these periods of career disruption as you go from place to place. What you get with Syneos Health time is the ability to, if the product fails, you can be redeployed into another interesting launch asset or over to a large pharma client as well. So I think it's an attractive value proposition for that talent base. Specifically, though, if there's a broad need, we can do that and build, I would call it a bespoke team around what that client actually needs. Everyone's different. Some people are very interested in building a medical affairs organization or building an access organization around pricing or being a marketing organization down the road, but they may have less interest in some of those other domains. So we can really sit down and find out where that company is looking to acquire their own internal talent or where they're looking for us to do it, and then build kind of a tailored solution around all of that. And said before, meet people where they are, listen to the need and address the need. I think that's really what we try to do when we can attract that talent and we can bring it in. So that can be a very broad relationship where we can do a lot of things for someone, or it can be very, very specific to specific areas that they're looking to do. The other part of it can evolve over time. So point in time, 18 months from launch, there's a lot of uncertainty still in terms of the commercial potential of the asset. The regulatory process is still being played out at that point in time. from a risk mitigation standpoint, it may make more sense for you to build that infrastructure with an outsource relationship or a partnership model with us. And then as you get more certainty toward regulatory approval and you get established in the marketplace, revenue and profit is coming in from those products, that may make more sense for you to invest in some of that infrastructure internally at that point in time. Our model and the way we work with people recognizes that. We understand that as the relationship needs to evolve as the company's strategy and position evolves over time as well. And so it's kind of an interplay between resources that the customer wants to have in internally and versus ones that they want to have externally with us. And there's a little bit of a back and forth evolution to that over time. So it's a pretty attractive model. It gives you a good bit of flexibility, dynamic changing over time as market conditions and strategic priorities change over time as well. Yeah. So it's a pretty good mix, I think.
Yeah, and listening to both of you talk about the relationship, it sounds like the crux of it is really that risk mitigation. I guess, Jeff, from your perspective of not investing too far ahead of the curve where there's risk, but also as you've outlined, Lee, in terms of people being able to work with the biotechs, which is pretty cool, these kind of areas, but not tied to one company. So balancing that risk mitigation with a bit of flexibility within the model as well. Is that a fair summary?
So for me, Paul, I think there was certainly, an element of risk mitigation, but I think right from the outset, as Lisa, going back to those early sort of consulting projects that then led in their various work streams to sort of more an integrated vision, that and internally there was a real communication exercise and a cultural challenge in that people in VBI, we are not outsourcing the commercialization. You need to understand that Syneos and VBI are inextricably linked. We are absolutely intertwined with each other. And we are entirely motivated and invested in this kind of single vision and model of the successful launch and commercialization of PreHevbrio. And that was really, really important because, in manufacturing and in R&D, we're used to outsourcing assays, we're used to outsourcing manufacturing to a CDMO, blah, 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 blah. But it was a very pointed, we want you to do this, and here's the tangible output. For 2.5 years, we worked with all of these groups across Syneos, and, there was not necessarily tangible output. So whilst there was a certain degree of risk mitigation, it was also very high risk, because we were thinking about, building, as Lee said, the medical affairs function. And the chairman of my board would say to you, Jeff, how do you know it's working? Show me something. It's like, well, I've met the people, I talk to the people, I trust the people. We haven't done anything yet. We don't have a key account structure yet set up. We don't have this, we don't have that. But, I have faith and trust in the collaborative and spirit of the partnership. And it kind of bore through. It really did. And so, for me, I think it was that kind of agility, the flexibility, the way in which we change plans. I can give you some examples of that. The way, for example, we found our Chief Commercialization Officer, John Taurman, who's now joined us in-house. But, we and Syneos, met John in the early days. He worked for 2 years with Syneos as our Chief Commercialization Officer and a senior person within Lee's organization. And then, by sort of mutual agreement, we brought John in-house just about the point we were launching the product in mid-2022, and now John's in-house. Now, I think that's a really good example of, the nature of this relationship and how we are inextricably linked. I mean, I don't know that John feels he's doing anything different today that he was not doing 4 to 6 months ago. Apart from the fact that he's now kind of in-house, as it were. But, it's a good example.
Yeah, and it's good that you're still friends and talking, despite something like that, because you've obviously found a win-win solution.
But you had asked Paul, I think, in the prep around the difference between outsourcing and partnership, and I think Jeff just articulated it, right? It's in some of the relationships that we have with, non-partnership clients, we'll call them. It is transactional at some level, right? There's a job to be done and there's an order given and an execution to be done and it's a contract. and that's a fine relationship. That is the basis for the services industry, right? That there's nothing wrong with that. It's a lot of people are very happy with that. However, in the relationship that we have with VBI, it is a partnership, and we work very much together to accomplish the goals that are set. There is an ongoing dialogue. Neither of us sees this as a transactional relationship. There are obviously transactions that occur between the companies, but it's never been discussed that way. We don't refer to it that way. It is a partnership. Everything is done in the spirit of partnership, and it is a multi-year relationship, and it probably expected to be a multi-asset relationship. And I think one of the things that the mindset shifts when you're in that kind of a relationship, because you can make an investment in a person or in something, and that can pay off down the road, right? You don't need it to pay off in a short-term time frame or something like that. Yeah. And we can take chances together on things and know that if they don't work out, that we'll respond to those chances together, those challenges together, and make it work. And that's just a different mindset. And you can behave and operate in a very different way. You bring different types of people, and you can have someone like John, who we hire, works for us for a period of time, goes over to Jeff's team, and we've continued to work together on a very regular basis, and it's very comfortable. You could think that would be awkward. It's not at all awkward. Yeah. It's the same people working on the same goal with the same thing, and the paycheck coming from a different place, but the goal and the objectives and the spirit of partnership remains the same. And so you don't get that unless you're in one of these partnership models, and you really don't get the opportunity to sort of unlock the value associated with it unless you're willing to make that leap. And it's pretty special when you're able to do it that way. And I think there's a lot of value for us as a services provider, and for Jeff and the VBI team as a manufacturer to operate that way. I think each party gets more out of the relationship.
And you're right. I mean, people talk about partnership a lot. It's a very overused word, but I mean, you can tell from the way that you describe how you work together and that flexibility that it is that genuine sense of one team and partnership. I've got to ask you, in terms of, we obviously VBI is focused on vaccines, and there's some nuances there versus other medicine development and commercialization, which are maybe worth touching. And I'd love to hear both of you just elaborate on what you see as different there and what specialized skills are needed. Jeff, maybe you'd like to comment on that first.
Yeah, well, so I mean, our launch was always going to be a challenge. It's not like we're launching the first statin in the cardiovascular market. Equally, we're not launching the 15th or 18th statin, which I think there are now in the markets. But we're somewhere in between. We are the fourth approved prophylactic hepatitis B vaccine in North America. And those other vaccines are a single antigen, the S protein, on the surface of a yeast-derived cell. And Dynavax uses a next-generation adjuvant. We are completely different. We have a virus-like particle that on the surface of the particle has all three surface antigens of hepatitis B vaccine.
Right.
Now, from that brief bit of science, if you expand that to the value proposition in this product, it is actually a pretty scientific discussion. And so what we did was, focusing with the Syneos team in terms of the value proposition, the brand proposition of this product, we recognized very early on that we were going to have to differentiate our product. So we have a branding called the Power of Three, i.e. the three surface antigens. And again, somewhat uniquely, we recruited a team of 15 MSLs in North America to start talking to key opinion leaders using the clinical data and the publications we had. Because if you were launching, I don't know, an asthma inhaler, it's an asthma inhaler, it's GSK versus AstraZeneca or something, the clinical data is much more straightforward, reduce exacerbations by 30%. This was more, clinicians saying, well, if the vaccine didn't work, it wouldn't have been approved by the FDA. So why should we switch from GSK's Endrix B, which is market share, to your vaccine, pre-HEPBio? It's inherently a scientific debate. And that's why we put the MSLs into the field to start discussing the clinical data and the scientific proposition in this product. Now, you only get those insights from working with people who kind of understand that. And it's our understanding, knowing that the scientific proposition, it's the Syneos commercialization expertise saying, we get it. So we should have MSLs in the field as soon as they're able to start using this published data and the clinical data to get the key opinion leaders, formulary committees, and various other people aware that this product's coming, obviously without promoting it per se, but just talking about the scientific and clinical development proposition. So for me, that's a really good example where, you work with people that have done it before, and maybe not only done it before once, but have done it before 10 times. And the vaccine world, once you have the approval, you then have to get it out to everyone, right?
Right.
It's HCPs at every level. It's the very best hepatologists in North America, the true global key opinion leaders, right down to the doctor who sees people in his surgery and says to them, oh, by the way, the ACIP recommendations on vaccination against hepatitis B used to be on a risk basis, which meant that actually individuals in the surgery had to identify them as being high-risk individuals, which was always a difficult discussion to be had. But in the first quarter of this year, the ACIP moved to a universal adult recommendation. All adults between the ages of 19 and 59 should be vaccinated against hepatitis B. Such is the contagious nature of this, such is the health burden. And that was a really important step because it shifted the emphasis from the individual to the clinician. So the clinician now is really empowered to say to individuals, if you haven't been vaccinated, even if you think you have, but you've forgotten about it, you should get vaccinated. That happened 3 months before we launched this product. And that's a great example of the agility of this commercial relationship. Because as soon as that happened, all of the trainers, all of the educators who are part of our team immediately had to change a lot of our promotional materials, had to change a lot of our positioning of the product, and also, had to train the sales representatives and the regional account, national account managers, government account managers to say, hey, we thought we were launching into a risk-based market, but now we're launching into this universal adult recommendation. So what is different about, the vaccine world? The vaccine world is, one that is inherently very scientific. And it's one where the commercial challenges are completely different in that you're actually, using a very potent drug, which you put into an otherwise healthy person to stop getting sick. That is very different to saying, look, my asthma inhaler is better than their asthma inhaler because mine reduces your son's coughing and choking by 30% of the time. I mean, most people can understand that. It's an acute situation. Prophylactic vaccination is very different.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great story. And the word that was going through our mind as you're describing that is science. And Lee, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but it very much feels like what you've got right here is not getting, for want of a better word, too lost in the process of developing and commercializing the vaccine and really focusing on the science and getting that story right.
Yeah, I agree. I have nothing to add to what Jeff said. I think he nailed it. It's once you make that scientific argument there and make that case, then you can start to convert HCPs and patients over to the drug and the benefits accrue. I think the only probable thing that I would add to it is just the idea of using that case to get reimbursement as well, right? Because when people have access to the product, the HCP needs to know that product can be paid for and that they're going to get reimbursed and all of that as well. So, but if without that scientific argument, you won't get the reimbursement that you need anyway. So it all goes back to the science and making that case as to why, especially when you're not the first to market and there is established product out there that you're competing with, you have to make differentiation kind of critical there, but it has to be differentiated on the science. But then once you get that, then the rest of it can be pulled through.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure it's not all been plain sailing as much as you can share and want to share. Any sort of big challenges you've had to overcome or a moment where you've gone, oh my goodness, we've really got to do something here and get this right?
Oh, Jeff, if you wanted to weigh in, I think the getting that reimbursement in place and getting that up to speed and getting the product into the supply chain and all of that, I think has probably been, the most difficult thing that we've faced. I think it's a great product. Got to get it out there and get it available. And that probably took a little longer, had a little bit more longer tail to it than we wanted it to up front. Jeff, I don't know what your thoughts on there, but I think we're largely past.
Yeah, no, I think, and again, this is where experience counts, right? We're learning together. Lee and I probably have been involved in, a dozen product launches each pre-pandemic, right? What you have to learn for the first time is that the world post-pandemic is very different. And you have to use your pre-pandemic experience to try and find our way in this new world. And, I'll just give you one very real practical example of we're trying to push, the major wholesalers to get our product, signed up, get it in the distribution system, get all the EDI testing done, everything else. And, bluntly, they've never said it as crudely as this, but bluntly, it's like, hey, Jeff, we understand your product's been approved. Yes, we do want to stock your product. Yes, we do want to get it into supply chain and out to HCP. But at the same time that you've just, you want to deliver us 5,000 cartons of your product, we've just got 5 million doses of, a bivalent Pfizer or Moderna vaccine that we need to ship out for boosters in the next 4 weeks. And that's just it's a very practical and very real problem that, they're obviously making money and getting paid on that business, and same as they are on ours. But having said that, there's a real operational urgency about getting boosters into the arms of the American population, particularly those who are at risk with comorbidity. So, we're kind of learning and finding our way through this, but having the experience across the broad team is really what gets you to the end. And, never once have I seen anyone in either one of our teams just throw up their hands and say, Jeff, this is impossible. I don't know what to do. Because people have been in this business, on average, people across our teams have been in this business for like 15 years or something. And so it's like, oh, I know what to do. I've got relationships. I've got a Rolodex. I'll make a telephone call. I get on a plane and go and visit the wholesaler in Chicago and explain to them why this is really important. And so, it's, getting through those sort of pandemic-related supply chain operational issues has been a challenge.
Yeah, and that kind of optimism and creativity, if I can label it that way, I think it's been a key ingredient in the past 2 years with COVID, because as you've outlined, it has disrupted things. It also creates opportunities. And I know, Jeff, you're also investing in some potential COVID assets as well, but it sounds like you've found a way to sort of keep the focus and navigate around those challenges without getting too bogged down by them. Let's just look ahead, because I'd love to sort of hear your thoughts on where you see the story going from here. And I say that cautiously because we all know the world of drug development and commercialization is notoriously unpredictable. But if we take that optimistic approach to it, where do you see things heading in the next 2 to 3 years, and where would you like to be? Jeff, perhaps you'd like to comment on this first.
Yeah, for me, as Lee said earlier, it's really important that we build this sort of inextricably linked and mutually invested model with a vision. And for me, the most important part of that vision is not saying, okay, Lee, I'm going to be knocking on your door in a year's time because I want to bring those 80 people that you've got dedicated to pre-Hebrio in-house. That is not here. We envisage building out this model, not only being successful with pre-Hebrio, but adding other products to that. Now, of course, GBM, touch wood, if we're successful, that is a very different commercialization challenge. But again, it's inherently scientific. And so, it is fantastic when I look at the LinkedIn pages of some of the our MSLs who are primarily employed by Syneos saying, Syneos on behalf of VBI. People sending me LinkedIn messages saying, really excited about GBM, really can't wait to start telling the story. So they really are emotionally and sort of psychologically invested in thinking, okay, we're excited doing pre-Hebrio, but, maybe GBM's 2 years down the line. So that for us is really important to work with people, as I say, that are emotionally, psychologically, and financially invested in making this partnership work. Where do I see VBI in 2 to 3 years' time? We have a number of exciting candidates that we haven't announced clinically. those candidates going into early phase 1 development. We have an exciting COVID-19 pipeline. Very shortly, we hope to be kicking off the first clinical study of a true pan-coronavirus candidate, which will not only protect against all of the currently known variants of concern, but potentially against novel and new coronaviruses that haven't made the human-to-human leap. So, I really, really want to carry on focusing on building out the pipeline to bring forward, opportunities to solve these significant unmet medical needs. And in doing so, I want to know that, our commercialization processes are in safe, experienced, compliant hands. And, that's not a hygiene factor. That's not something I would ever take for granted. And, I'm going to carry on spending 35% of my time on. But, I know that it's in the hands of experienced people. So that, for me, is the vision.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. And Lee, I'm guessing you're very aligned with Jeff and where VBI wants to go. But I guess looking beyond that in terms of what else that means for you and the teams at Syneos, what are you excited about the next few years?
Yeah, I think it gets back to this sort of alternative approach to market that we talked about before. It's this binary choice of, build it in-house or, license it away. I think more and more that is becoming a three-choice conversation. And, I think, we're very well positioned to continue to do things with VBI like we've talked about, but with others as well. We have others that we're doing it with. But I think that market will continue to evolve a bit. We'll evolve along with it. I think, we're self-aware as to places where we want to add or develop further capabilities, things that, talent that we need to acquire to really make that sing the way we want it to. But it's pretty exciting because I think, you all get into this business, I think, for two reasons. One, obviously, is patients, unmet need, and solving for that and making the world a better place. But the second part of it is, can you look back at the end of your career and say, I contributed something new to the way that the business operates and a better way to bring products to market or a better way to help clients, customers commercialize their assets in a way that, mitigates their risk or gives them different benefits. So I think there's a real opportunity to look back personally. I would say, 10 years from now and say, we really were at the forefront of something new, a new way of doing this that's no longer new. And it's just an accepted way of doing it. That's pretty exciting, right? So if you've helped patients along the way and you've contributed to sort of the way that the industry operates and brings products to market in a more efficient and effective way, that's something to really hang your hat on. And I think there's a real opportunity for that to happen. There's a lot of capital that's been put into this industry along the way that has gone south. Right. And if, in the end, if you think you play this thing out a little bit, I think there's a way for, people to be more confident in the way they invest, that there's risk mitigation strategies there's investment models that make sense, routes to market that use that capital more efficiently to get the right products in the right people's hands. That's pretty exciting. So that's kind of our forward view of the world. Our relationships with people like VBI are critical for that to happen because they're proof points, right? It's one thing to talk about it in a theoretical way. It's another way to point to it and say that's what it looks like when you do it the right way.
Yeah, and it's clear from our discussion today that the partnership is underpinned by that shared vision, that shared trust, I guess, in terms of what you're doing. So I thought it might be quite nice to end with a bit more fun question, perhaps, which hopefully doesn't destroy the partnership. Because if you were to describe each other in just one word, what that one word would be, and Lee, perhaps I can come to you first on this one.
I would describe Jeff as passionate. He's very passionate about the science and about getting that science pulled through to the patient and solving for unmet needs, and that passion manifests itself in a lot of different ways. I would also, we could pick two. I'll bend the rules a bit. I would say bold. I think Jeff's bold enough to be willing to do that in a different way and be non-traditional in his approach to it. And I think when you put passion and boldness together, you get a pretty good outcome.
That's great. And Jeff, what's your one word or two words if you want to bend the rules as well?
Well, I can think of lots of words to describe Lee, but if I'll play by the rules, first of all, I would say invested. And I've said it a few times looking back on the last 40 minutes or so. I think, professional, psychological, emotional, and, from a Syneos perspective, capital financial, invested is the word I use. I know that Lee is very senior in the organization. And you asked earlier about big pharma versus small biotech or emerging biotech. Lee is extremely senior in the organization. I know I can pick up the phone anytime and speak to him. And I know he spends a lot of time thinking about VBI when I'm not on the phone. So I would say invested.
That's great. Well, look, from my perspective, fascinating hearing you talk about your story. And I think a really good reminder, the science is great, and obviously wish you both the best of luck, because if you win, then lots of patients win big time with this. So it's great hearing that story, but it's a good reminder for me that it is about capabilities and expertise, but that relationship and the way you operate together, the way you interact, that's key in business wherever you are. And it's been great hearing that side of the story today. So I just want to finish by saying, Jeff, Lee, thanks very much for joining me on this podcast. It's been great to hear your story. That concludes this episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more details of this episode, including a download link for the podcast and information about other installments in the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher, and Podme, where you can find and subscribe by searching for pharmaphorum. And don't forget to visit our website, where you can sign up for daily or weekly email pharmaceutical news and analysis bulletins, and of course follow us on Twitter, where we are pharmaphorum.